I'd like to just start off with Desiree doing an introduction of herself, and then we'll go down the line, and then Karen, you'll be the last, okay? Okay.
Thank you, Celeste. Desiree Highsmith Holcomb. I currently lead Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Quest Diagnostics.
Madani.
Oh, great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Modani Moreu. I am the Senior Advisor on Diversity, Inclusion, and Shared Leadership for UN Women.
Good afternoon. My name is Ramon Velez. I am the Director of Patient Access for Emory Hospitals in Atlanta.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Bonsack. I'm CEO and owner of 2020 RMP. I am based out of northern Minnesota. I got to say that with an accent. So I come from a family of 12 kids. 8 of us are adopted from different countries. I'm smack in the middle. And as you can see, I am often loud. Sometimes you have to either be loud or wise in my family, and I was never the latter, so I had to be loud.
I'm Jason Ashley. I'm the Patient Financial Services Director at St. Joe's Candler here in Savannah. I've been in healthcare for about 12 years with various organizations, most recently at Wellstar. If anyone's wondering what I'm doing on a diversity panel, I am a member of the LGBTQ community, which is why I'm dressed up on Personal Pride Parade today. So whenever I was asked to give my perspective, I'm thrilled to be here. Look forward to the discussion.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think this mic is on, but if not, I think you can hear me. My name is Karen Hill. I am one of the associate directors at Emory Healthcare in the Patient Financial Services Department, and I have been in healthcare, at Emory, not healthcare, at Emory, 39 years. Oh, Lord have mercy. Am I crazy?
Well, thank you. Okay, so I just want to start off by just talking about diversity is not just a conversation about women, but I am a woman, and given the platform, I decided that I should share some statistics with you guys that in the academic year of 2020, over 500,000 women compared to 300,000 men will earn master's degrees in the United States. McKinsey partnered with Lean, an organization, and they had a study that was the largest study done probably in the last 7 years. And the article published last month about women in the workplace reported on women in corporate America. This survey represented 423 organizations employing 12 million people and more than 65,000 people surveyed on their workplace experience, including in-depth interviews of women of diverse identities, including women of color, LGBTQ plus women, and women with disabilities. Some of the findings from that report highlighted that there continues to be a disconnect between companies' growing commitment to racial equality and racial equity. There is a lack of improvement in day-to-day experience for women of color, that there is an increased risk of women of color than of white women to be on the receiving end of disrespect, and that consistently white women feel they are allies of women of color but unwilling to speak out against discrimination, mentor or sponsor women of color, or to take actions to advocate for them. So when I was talking about with the group on the panel, I came up with an analogy that I think some people agreed with and some disagreed, so I'm going to ask my panelists when they get ready to speak, feel free to share their thoughts. But my analogy was, do you guys remember in the early part of 2020 when you had to take your first COVID test? So I distinctly remember sitting down and asking the nurse, is this gonna hurt? And she said, no, but it's gonna be uncomfortable. And if you have it done and it's not uncomfortable, then you're not gonna get accurate results. So I'm here to tell you that with this conversation, it may be uncomfortable. If it isn't, then we didn't do something right on this panel. okay? So talking about diversity and inclusion and even equity, which is really important. So you'll see many organizations, their programs are diversity, equity, and inclusion. It can evoke a multitude of different emotions: anger, fear, guilt, argumentative behavior, silence. Unfortunately, the results can prevent the in-depth exploration and communication that drives change. But more importantly, not having the conversation protects and perpetuates the bias and racial inequity and behaviors that we need to address. So for the next 30 minutes, this is a safe space. I want you guys to feel free that your thoughts and your concerns will be heard and be respected. And you can expect that this discomfort that you may feel will result with tolerant enlightenment and meaningful dialogue. So I'm going to start off with some questions to our panelists, and I'm going to ask Madani and Ramon to start us off. Madani starting as, what does diversity mean to you, and why should it be a consideration in your organization?
Ramon?
I think she said you first, Madani.
Oh, okay. Super. We'll get this right. It'll be flawless by the time we're done. So first of all, Celeste, thank you so much. And I just realized that people in your audience may not know what UN Women is. So I'll just say that this is a United Nations entity for the empowerment of women and I am based in Boston, but our offices are in New York. And I've been with them for about a year. But before that, I worked in international development in senior leadership and bring a lot of experience in the design of organizational change processes and setting up the type of infrastructure needed to operate successful programs. And the attention to diversity, inclusion, and equity, and for UN Women, this includes shared leadership, is an important part of that infrastructure. So at UN Women, we are, as I said, are focused on gender equality and the empowerment of women across both public and private sectors. And when I think about diversity, I consider three dimensions. The first two are visible, like gender and ethnicity. The second dimension is invisible, religion, socioeconomic status. And the third dimension is related to understanding the potential that diversity brings and then leveraging it as an integral part of our mission and strategy. Ramon?
Thank you. And again, good afternoon. Celeste asked us this question when we were prepping for this panel, and it brought back some memories. A few of you know me. I'm of Cuban descent, raised in Miami, and so back in the mid 70s, Miami underrepresented the Cuban and Hispanic population in all forms of government, all forms of leadership. School boards and things like that. So they formed an organization, the Spanish American League Against Discrimination, and they used an acronym of SALAD. And the reason for that SALAD was, you can eat each of those individual pieces of salad, but it won't taste the same as having the whole salad and all the pieces of the salad. And I'm paraphrasing it, and I probably do a bad job of it, but that's diversity for me. It's an inclusion of every piece of the population, every nick and corner of the population, in order to make us better culturally, business-wise, and education-wise. And I think it's important as a whole that we, as a group, as leaders, get that mindset in order to make us better as an organization.
Thank you, Ramon. So Karen, I wanted to see whether or not you, given the number of years at Emory as well, would like to share your perspective on what diversity is and maybe consideration at your organization.
Okay, when I think of diversity, and it is interesting that currently, as we speak, my slogan on my signature is, to me, diversion is like a box of crayon. We're all different, we're all unique. Some sharp, some dark, some light, some dull, some points, but we all must live together in order for it to be effective. And to me, that's how I look at diversion. We don't all think alike, which is good. We don't all look alike. We have various aspects of interpretation. But to me, the organization should embody all of that, be it gender, as they stated, be it faith-based, and I don't say religion, I say faith-based because, honestly, let me share a personal thing. It goes down to even the COVID vaccination. I am a Baptist, been Baptist all my life. My son was born Baptist. My godfather is Baptist. However, we share different beliefs on that COVID vaccination. So it can't be religion, it has to be faith-based. And when I talk with them, I was like, okay, my son is young, definitely against vaccination, but he practices social distancing, actually is a practicing Moor. My godfather is Baptist, 94 years old, and he said, I'm not getting vaccine. I'm not getting vaccinated. I said, why? My father was from the Tuskegee experiment, faith-based. So, to me, all of that plays a part in who we are, how we think, and the organization. And it is interesting when Emory, and everybody know, Emory mandated the vaccine, and my boss came and said, when they were thinking about it, what did I think of it? And I said, here I am. If that's the perspective you take, it's okay. However, you must be open to a waiver, be it medical, be it faith-based. And I didn't say religion because it isn't religion, it's their faith.
Right. So Karen, thank you. I think that is actually a whole nother topic too. We could talk about that. But I'm gonna bring this to Kim and ask, Kim, can you share? Do you feel you have to sacrifice skills being a business owner? Do you feel that you have to sacrifice skills, experience to create diversity in your organization? If so, can you tell us why?
Thank you, Celeste. That's a tough one. So my instinctive reaction or response to that question is no. But then if you think about it, depending on which position I'm hiring for, if I'm hiring for sales and marketing and their diverse attributes and personality completely outweighs what I thought was needed from a skills and experience standpoint, I'm going to make my decision based on that. But if I'm looking for certain position with specialized skill sets that I need and experience, I have to go with that. But for me, what it boils down to is skills and experience and diversity. They're not really mutually exclusive. Why does it have to be one or the other?
Sure.
Yeah. So Desiree, comments?
Yeah, so, I think the perception is that, like when you're looking for diversity, you're looking for numbers. Diversity is really, when you think about diversity, it's the representation within your organization, but that really shouldn't be the goal. The goal is inclusion, right? Diversity is a fact. It's about numbers and representation. Inclusion is an act. It's about the culture you create. It's about the treatment of people within an organization, how they feel about that organization. So I'm a big believer of doing things from the inside out. So the first thing an organization should be mindful of is, are we creating an environment where diverse employees would feel that they could thrive, where they could be successful, where they'll be seen and valued, and they can contribute and grow in their careers? So, that's number one. Sometimes we start at M and we're not starting at A, which is to create the environment. And we move to just start looking for diversity and hoping that we get it. And then I think another failure is when we post and pray. We just post something and hope that they will come. And there needs to be an intentionality around seeking out diversity. So when you've created that environment, your candidates are going to see that reflected in many ways. They're going to look at your websites. They're going to see, am I reflected in the images I see on your website? Am I reflected in the leadership team that I see that you post on your website? They're going to look at who you have chosen to interview them. And is there diversity among the search committee that you've assembled to interview them? So as much as we might feel from an organizational standpoint that we're seeking out diversity, diverse candidates are choosing whether or not they want to be part of our organization by what they see. And what they see are going to be a reflection of our values and our values in action. So, there's not a need to sacrifice skills, but I really feel that sometimes we are not intentional as we should be around looking in the right place, pursuing diverse talent, but first and foremost, creating an environment where diverse talent feel that they can come, be a part of something great, contribute, and be valued and respected for what they bring and the different perspectives that they offer.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So in our conversation, I think one of the really prominent things that came up was talking about geography. And so I wanted to ask Jason, how does geography dictate your general sensibility surrounding inclusion?
Well, I agree with what Desiree was saying. I want to be part of a diverse team, and I want my team to be as diverse as possible. But when you think about geography, I was a PAD at a hospital up in northwest Georgia, and I just didn't have the pool of candidates that, I didn't have the opportunity to have a diverse team just because, where I was in the state. And then, of course, I moved to Atlanta, and you have a huge population of people to choose from. And now I'm here in Savannah. So geography definitely plays an important role in who you can hire and who's applying. On a personal note, I think we talked about this, I carry myself a little bit different being in Atlanta as opposed to being in, and I'm not picking on Vidalia, but I'd just say in a little town in the South. I'm not necessarily going to hold hands with my partner somewhere in a little podunk town somewhere in the deep South. It's just, and I'm from here, so geography definitely plays a role in who you are.
And feeling included, right? So
Absolutely.
going back to what Desiree said, so it's inclusion first.
Right.
Madani, your thoughts?
Sure. And thank you, Jason and Desiree, because you teed this up really well. So the United Nations Women's Entity works in over 50 countries. And if you consider that every organization has some sort of cultural bandwidth, and I think that's what Desiree and Jason were referring to, then the broader that cultural bandwidth is, the better an organization can navigate difference and create an environment where every person can achieve their highest potential. And this is what Desiree is talking about when she says that diversity might be the numbers, but inclusion is the game. Mm-hmm. And this is a central tenet to creating the conditions for inclusion that, on one hand, work to accommodate diversity in all its forms, and on the other hand, is clear on what role leadership has in providing the psychological safety that is the backbone of true inclusion. So when we think about geography, we think about what it is, what our mission is, what it is we're trying to do in a certain geography. We have to contend with staff that come from all over the world. We have to contend with the fact that each person brings their own cultural bandwidth. And then we have to figure out how to accommodate those so that we can create a truly inclusive environment for them to bloom in.
Yes, yeah. So
Can I add something to that, Celeste, a little bit?
absolutely.
You know, and when you compare, again, looking back at Miami, and you know, most people would not consider that an international city compared to Georgia or anywhere in Georgia. The pool of candidates that you would get is going to go all the way across every spectrum that you can think of. Whereas to Jason's point here, you kind of have a divide of, you know, urban versus rural kind of areas, and there's that diversity doesn't go across, you know, into some of those areas in rural Georgia. I'm not going to say in Florida it's completely diverse, but I know in Dade County, Miami, and probably Broward, you know, it's pretty well international, and your pool of candidates goes across a huge spectrum of candidates and allows leaders to be inclusive. It's still our responsibility to bring in the right people if we're given the pool.
Right. So as much as we talk about, you know, how horrible the pandemic is, we also try to remember what are some of the upsides and what are, you know, we're all working virtually. So this question is really geared toward how has the pandemic impacted your organization's diversity goals? So I'm going to ask that to Kim and maybe the audience.
Well, I guess I'll start off.
Yes, please.
So I'm from Timbuktu, Minnesota, population about 1,500 people. So you talked about pool of candidates. As you can imagine, my pool of candidates is very limited. So with the pandemic, if anything, one positive thing that came out of it was that it really allowed us the opportunity to work remotely, spread our wings, spread across the country, looking for candidates of all in terms of what fits and what we need in our organization. And believe me, I am all for growing our community, creating jobs, and I still support that. But at the end of the day, there are certain aspects of what our organization needs, adding more diversity, adding more diverse ideas, viewpoints is always a healthy thing. So it's a great opportunity from a pandemic. If there's any one good thing, it allowed us to look beyond our small community.
So I want to ask you guys, so I said I wanted you guys to get involved, and feel free to stop. I've asked the panelists to make sure they just jump in, especially since I can't see them unless I'm looking at the sides. So would anybody like to just share whether or not there have been some changes or just maybe some deliberate acts around the fact that people are remote within your organizations to create more inclusion or diversity? Anyone willing to share, or anyone feel like they're going to go back and say this is something we can do? Sure.
I'm not sure that I can, especially being in Atlanta, that I can say it was specific to the pandemic versus all of the events that happened as far as, you know, racial injustice, especially those were the things that I think started to spark inclusion, diversity, and those conversations. I think people had more time to think about it in the pandemic because we were alone, but it was
You might have been alone, right?
those situations. And then having to have that engagement. So we were in a pandemic, we had all these things going on. There's hate, there's confusion. And I think that started the conversation more so than truly the pandemic.
Gotcha. That's very...
I'm late, sorry.
We heard you.
Okay, no, appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay.
I'm not sure I agree with you that it necessarily wasn't the pandemic, but it forced even organizations, including Emory, to take a look and see, okay, where are we? Does this represent, does our leadership, does our, as she indicated, does our website, does our actions actually exemplify inclusion? And what do we need to do? I know, You know, while we all want to be perfect, we are not perfect. So how do we get better? How do we use this as talking points? Because as you indicated, if we don't mention it, if we don't say anything, then it's not going to magically go away. It, you know, and it also afforded people the opportunity to feel okay, to speak up and say something. You know, I think that was the biggest thing. The challenge was people were like, okay, well, I know it exists, but maybe I shouldn't say anything for fear. But at least all of the episodes made it like, okay, if I say something, okay, if I don't, okay, what do I have to lose? And so it encouraged people to start, and organizations to start thinking, how do we get better?
So Jason, she just asked your next question, which is,
Oh,
what is your
I'm sorry.
organization? No, that's perfect. That's, you asked the question I was going to ask. He has to answer. And that is, what conditions are created for people at your organization to ensure diversity and inclusion?
I really don't know. I've thought about this a lot. And I said in my first answer that I want to be part of a diverse team. I want to have a diverse team. And thinking of my direct reports, I really don't. So Tyler, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to let you go. Got to make room for somebody else. I'm kidding. I really just, I try to encourage my leadership team to hire, but as Kim pointed out, you want people with experience, and it is solely based on the applicants that you get, unless you're actually going out to really recruit. And I don't think we probably could do a much better job of that. But I know I did reach out after our first meeting to see if we had a diversity officer or an inclusion officer. I know we did at Wellstar, but we don't at St. Joe's Candler, and I think that would be a good thing if we did.
Yeah, I think that's great for you to share. Desiree, your thoughts?
Unless there's a question.
Yeah, so I think it's layers of things. There, sometimes I think organizations are looking for that silver bullet, that packaged program to solve all of their diversity and inclusion problems. But really, what it is are a myriad of touch points. And you spoke earlier, Celeste, about, the COVID test and how if it's not painful, you're not doing it right, which I totally agree with. And, but at the same time, I also, understand when you have a large organization, so we have 50,000 employees, you have 50,000 different journeys with the content of diversity and inclusion, people with different experiences and backgrounds and ways of thinking. So one of the things that I like to share with them is, it's almost like when you are exercising and doing something new for the first time, and you're using a muscle that you haven't used before, and the next day you're super sore in that particular muscle. That's your sign, that's your signal that I have not worked that muscle before or enough. And then you say, well, you know what? I need to do a little bit better with this because clearly I'm not, challenging myself the way I should. And I say, that for us is a signal of what we should do physically. When you have discomfort, that's a signal for you, this might be new. And instead of responding with maybe defensiveness or shutting down or being silent, I'm going to lean into this and find ways to engage with this content. So some of the ways to your question, Celeste, around what we've done, we had a myriad of trainings for leaders called The Conversation, and another wave called Real Talk. And in this content, we had the conversations. And the thing that I think is important to go into these conversation understanding is that you're not supposed to go in having all the answers. There's a thing called cultural humility, which really relieves you and absolves you of needing to feel like you have all the answers, you know everything about everything. And a lot of times our leaders want to feel like they have all the answers. And this is one conversation you enter into understanding you don't. And you enter in as a student, curious to learn. And we'll learn today from Ramon. We're learning from Kim. We're learning from Jason and Mathani and Karen and Celeste. We learn as we listen. So these conversations that have erupted as a result of social unrest and the pandemic and all kinds of challenges have invited this conversation, which has been great. Other layers of opportunity are engaging employee business networks. So we have EBNs, other people might have employee resource groups, affinity groups, but allowing employees to have a forum in which they can connect with a demographic which they identify with, to be able to engage the organization, teach the organization, and also provide the edification and professional development for that group. But one of the key things that we often don't see is that those groups are prime opportunities for allies to get engaged. So while you might identify with a women in leadership group, and you have no knowledge about maybe your Pride or Proud network, you might decide to join one that you affiliate with and one that you don't, so that you can learn and become an ally and become engaged and becoming educated. So there are so many ways to infuse inclusive behaviors, and it's also in the language of your values. You know, most organizations tout, you know, some type of ethical value, right, as part of their mission statements. And when we look at that and we look at respect or even innovation or continuous improvement, all of these things require diverse thinking, new ways of seeing the world, different perceptions and ideas. And if we're not creating an environment where that's welcome, we're not going to get it in those spaces when we're looking to innovate. So every touch point is an opportunity to engage and create a culture of inclusion. And, you know, looking for a silver bullet will never work, but looking for the way you can layer it throughout your organization so that your employees know that it's authentic and it's a true representation of the heart of that organization.
Thank you. Do we have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, for yesterday it was mentioned rural healthcare is experiencing some staffing challenges, as we all are. And for Kim, I know you work in that environment. Jason, I think you maybe don't, but have had. Are rural healthcare environments expanding their searches now to look, because you can, right? You can hire remote staff. You have a really shallow pool of candidates in your local market. Have you changed your hiring practices now to reach further out because you can and look for remote diversity?
We have. Before, without losing the jeopardy of creating jobs in our community, we limited our ads to the local papers because we wanted to, there's value in training people in person and the need to have them come in the office. Well, with that being somewhat lifted, we've expanded our ads beyond that to go more national. We are going way beyond, not just from the local standpoint, because we do want to stay local as well too, because it's important, but we are at the state level or at the national level in terms of our ads being posted, because we want to make sure we can attract as many folks that are potentially available and have an interest in our organization. And if we can get more people involved and interested and have a wider pool than Timbuktu, Minnesota, hey, it's a win-win for us, right?
So I wanted to say this morning during your panel, but our senior leadership at St. Joe's Candler is very much against us working from home and being remote. And that's one of my arguments, is we could recruit a wide variety of people if we were able to let them work from home. And we've lost people to work from home, remote positions, or other opportunities. So it's got to. I mean, it really does.
That we're all going to have to change our opinions in that regard.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to say, I think it's diversity, and it starts with something like this. As far I understand that this is the first diversity panel that HFMA's had. Second? Okay, well, I know I'm going to go back to work, and we're going to talk about how we can have a more diverse workforce, and it starts with putting that idea in your head. So I really appreciate this.
No, that's great. That's great. And it speaks to Desiree's comments about being intentional.
Right.
So as we begin to wrap up, I'd like to ask each one of you to share kind of personally, just like we were just talking about, something that you would like to do that's going to contribute to diversity in your workforce, and share your kind of personal comments, if you will. I guess I can start off with remote.
Yeah, you picked the guy who speaks the most typically. So
Right, that's why I gave you more time.
There's two things here, and it kind of alluding to the previous question a little bit. or to Karen's response, I think, as a group, hospitals are always got some initiative or the other and going on, and it's what's the greatest flavor, what's the newest flavor of that initiative. And I think over a year, 2 or 3, we lose that initiative. It's on us as a group back to making sure that we don't lose sight of this in the scheme of things. Yes, we just recently hired our first, chief diversity officer at Emory back in September. Okay, we just did that, and there's all types of initiatives that are getting started. The thing for Karen and I and a few of the other leaders that are in the room from Emory, we've got to make sure that we take, to use a football vernacular, take the ball and run with it, and run a long way, not, for the next year, for the next 5 years or 10 years, especially if you're at the beginning of your career, in the middle of your career. This is something that is important to carry forward, because the reality is, especially here in Georgia, as the demographic changes across the state, it's going to be important that we have a staff that not only understands who they're talking to, but makes that patient feel welcome because they can relate to them. And in the past, I don't think we've had that. Personally, when I got here in '93, we didn't have it. And so I think it's important that we move that forward as a group. The second thing, the other thing for us as leaders is I don't hire anybody directly. I put panels in front of me of what I consider a fairly diverse group of, other managers below me to do that first group of hiring or first group of evaluation of staff, so that they come in and then hand off to me something that I may not see from an inclusion standpoint, a diversity standpoint, because I do have a fairly diverse management team. And the last thing I would say in that respect is making sure HR is giving you the right pool. They've got all these computer robotics that says spits out applications with buzzwords. And half of the time we're getting a pool that just doesn't fit for what we're looking for. We have to push our HR recruiters to get us the right pool.
Thank you. Madani?
Yeah, thanks, Ramon, and I've really enjoyed this panel and the discussions, because all the points that have been made speak to, as Desiree said, the different aspects of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So my title is interesting because, in addition to diversity and inclusion, I am charged with ensuring that we have a strategy for shared leadership. And this last is, I think, part of what, to me, I heard it in part of Ramon's answer. Shared leadership is an important element for us because it underlines the very important role that our leaders are expected to play in creating conditions for real inclusion and belonging. And we define shared leadership as the genuine transfer of power that accompanies distributed responsibility. In the example that Ramon just gave about making sure that we're going the extra step in really looking for a diverse pool to choose from, it means that there is accountability at that level. They have not just responsibility to do that work, but the authority to make it happen. And because the actual decisions around inclusion happen on a day-to-day basis. It is the person sitting in front of a decision and choosing to make that decision one way or the other. And in that moment, they need to be in the habit of maybe checking their bias, maybe double checking what the machine has provided as candidates, etc. And so for us, this is based on shared accountability, and it allows our teams that, as I mentioned, are based all over the world. It allows them and their members to act autonomously. And so my role is to help us get to an agreed framework that includes some simple metrics to help us track our progress, so that at the end of the day, what we are interested in is a real change in the lived experiences of our personnel in terms of working in a place that they can attest to being not only diverse, but truly inclusive.
Thank you, Madani. Kim?
Okay. So, I guess, what's the question again? I'm just kidding, I know the question. So there are a lot of stereotypes that I think come with diversity. For example, Jane Grey and I often, I'm sure many of you know Jane Grey, but she and I often get mistaken for one another, because I guess there's a stereotype that us Asians look alike and that we're great at math. Well, I personally don't think I look like Jane, and I suck at math. I am a bad driver, so that stereotype is true. But, so what can I personally contribute to adding and creating more diversity in my workplace? I guess I will hold myself more accountable to making sure we do more and continue to expand our ads and job opportunities, be a better, leader, example, so that our organization can improve themselves. But I'm in a position where I can hire directly and I can have an influence, so I should take that more responsibly and take more accountability for it. That's what I can do.
Okay, thank you. And I know, Jason, you already said you're going back and having the conversation to continue to push the envelope. Karen?
Personally, I am committed to looking at our policies and benefits, and because inclusion to me is not just, okay, it might be husband and wife on your benefits, but when you look into all of those policies, practices, what does that look like? As they indicated, it's more than just the surface, and it is when you start looking into deep in the nitty gritty, pull that onion back, and you'll be like, well, I be darned, okay. So I would definitely start looking at that, because I have not, full transparency, haven't even looked at our policies, our benefits to see, are they inclusive? They may be, must be, different sex, might be,
Right, perfect.
I need to look into that. So I would definitely take that on.
Thank you, great. And Desiree?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Karen said. That's very foundational, that if you haven't looked at your policies and practices, and if there's equity there, you can't, evangelize inclusion, so that's a very foundation. And certainly within benefits and your leave policies, and even the equity around parental leave, are you giving leave to your men who are new fathers and all of that? So I believe that, one, the structures must support the intention you have. So if your intention is to hire diversity and you have a structure that's just based on who you get, you haven't built a structure to support your priority. So you have to go back and look at, well, where are the vulnerabilities? Where are the gaps in our process that don't facilitate the end that we're looking for? Does that mean that we're not posting in the right places? Does that mean we haven't created the right pipelines and partnerships with institutions? Does it mean that we have not demanded a diverse pool, as Ramon mentioned, and managers are, moving to interview because they want to get the proverbial butt in a seat before they want to really have a diverse pool. And sometimes it takes more time to do it right. So I think looking at the structures is the first thing. If you're not getting the result you want, back into it and look at what is the structure that's supporting that outcome. Another thing I recommend too is, often you might take on the burden or the opportunity, however you might see it, as an individual. But I think that, assembling a council, a diversity council, is hugely important to get perspective from across your organization, and also to get insights into how equity is being experienced. And to Karen's point, do we know everything about the way that our employees are experiencing our great intentions? So from the front line to the boardroom, have we considered what the whole employee experience is and the entire patient experience? And are we being considerate of that? And so one of the things that I've been doing in my organization, outside of the wonderful things that the panel have shared, is developing a training program for our leaders around trust. And before we can even get to these difficult conversations, again, you can't start in the middle. You're asking people to have difficult conversations with someone they may or may not trust, to be vulnerable with, to be transparent with. So the concepts and the behaviors of trust are truly critical leadership competencies to be foundational to having a culture of trust. And then having a very structured listening platform, regular engagement surveys, pulse surveys. So you're listening to your employees, you're getting their feedback, you're bringing it to a council, you're doing something about it, and you're cultivating the relationship between manager and employee, because we all know people don't leave organizations, they leave their manager. So that relationship is hugely important in creating a culture of inclusion for any organization.
Thank you. That was awesome. So you guys, we really wanted to make sure that there was something specific that you could take back to your organizations. And so I challenge every one of you. You've heard a number of things. So you've heard us talk about that you need to have metrics. So there should be diversity metrics. Even if you need to bake them into your performance evaluations, it shows how committed you are to creating a culture and changing your culture to be inclusive. You've heard that you can provide incentives and stress on accountability. You've heard that we talked about senior leaders need to fully and publicly support diversity and equity inclusion. Also, provide education and training is an option, and that training is focused on, obviously awareness on those unconscious biases that exist. And I even heard someone talk about during our conversation sending out reminders. So it's not enough to just have a panel. Sometimes right before people are doing interviews, sending out reminders about the things that can influence your evaluation. And so just raising awareness about those unconscious biases before you're interviewing will result in a different type of interview, or someone considering the candidates differently, because sometimes you just don't know, right? And so I would love for you guys to take one of these points back, hold on to it, be committed to it the way Elizabeth is, as asking me to be part of her allies in talking about diversity and inclusion and making a change in your organization. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Celeste. And yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that. Tammy Jackson, who's the current chair of HFMA nationally, is our first chairperson of color. So it's a big year for us as an organization. Diversity is a big push for her. I've made it one of my pushes. Celeste has been awesome to help me figure out what that looks like, how we do it. This is our second panel. We have scholarship recipients here this week that we reached out to try to, change the landscape of the room, invite, people that may not have had an opportunity to attend one of our institutes before. So that's one of the other things that we're doing. It's a brand new initiative, so if there's anyone in this room that's interested in joining the conversation with us about what else we can do, I've learned so much in my conversation. Celeste and I have talked about this for hours, and I've just learned so much, and I feel like change happens here. It doesn't happen watching CNN or listening to the talking heads or any of that kind of stuff. It literally happens with conversations. It happens with being able to sit down and say, I never thought about it that way, or I never thought about the experience that way, or I never thought about, what it would be like to walk into a room where no one else looks like me. So we have a lot of, we want to make a change, and we have a lot of energy and momentum around it right now. So I very much appreciate all you guys for helping us do that. And if anyone is interested in working on that with us, then please see Celeste or I. But we are done with education for the day, and now it's all about fun. All right, guys, we'll see you at the reception at the
Thanks,
Oktoberfest
Ramon,
party.
Desiree,
You're welcome.
and Madani. Bye. Thank you.
Thank
guys were
you.
great.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Manthani.
Yes, thank
Bye.
you. I am so not. Wait a minute first.